Welcome to the Old Mac Gang podcast, or OMG, a podcast vodcast with a panel of longtime Mac Apple users who want to discuss the most relevant apps and services to age-seasoned users. I'm Marty Gensius, an Apple enthusiast and podcaster. I am a 67-year-old age-seasoned user who's collected a group of great friends, folks that I've met at Mac user groups, folks that I've met at Macstock, and folks that have been brought along by friends. So we're just glad to have everyone here. All age-seasoned users. Let's see who we have on the panel tonight.
I'm Gary. I'm age-seasoned. I'll be 88 in July. I live in Northeast Ohio with Marty and Peter.
Okay, hey, I'm Chris. I'm 77 for another couple of weeks. Then I'll turn 78. I've been around the Mac since 1984. I started out with Apple user groups in Dallas and Austin. And then I worked for Apple for a while. Then I worked for a university out in the Bay Area doing IT. And now I'm retired and having lots of fun with all my Apple toys. And I think life is good.
And I'm Peter. I'm 72 and live in Bay Village, Ohio, on the opposite side of Cuyahoga County from Gary. And if I kept going in his direction and then twice as far again, I'd be at Marty's. We all met through the Northeast Ohio Apple Club. I use a lot of Apple products and services, including a MacBook Pro, iPad Pro, iPhone, and Apple Watch. And these make my life easier and help me pursue a variety of interests, mainly hiking, films, music, and math.
Hi, I'm Bob. I'm also in Tucson. I'm a longtime Mac user and a longtime Mac user group member and leader.
Okay, so we have a topic tonight in terms of how we use our cameras, and we'll get to that in a minute. But there are a couple of news pieces that I thought, particularly for the age group that we're working with. And, this came out. I saw it. Dave Ginsburg saw it and shared it. And Chuck Joyner saw it and shared it. But I think it would be something that many of us and many folks in our age group would get upset about. And this is an article that came out that talked about, it came out from Engadget, and it talked about U.S. libraries cutting ebook and audiobook lending programs following, in particular, Trump's executive order. And the impact of this is money that is sent from the government under the Institute of Museum and Library Services, then goes from there to the states, and the states make decisions in terms of distributing it to libraries, particularly to small libraries, that it then supports programs that a lot of age-seasoned users use, like Libby and Hoopla, ways that they get audiobooks and ways that they get digital books. Just really important programs for folks our age, and we're seeing some pressure on that in terms of loss of funding, and that being pushed down to the states and then being pushed down to local libraries. So just reaction to it, ideas that you have about it. Do you guys use Libby or Hoopla? Is that a common app for you or people that you know? Yeah, Peter.
Yes, I use all kinds of ebooks. I'm a gigantic library user from the time that I was very little till today. It's a place I go to work a lot of times, especially when I'm traveling. I find libraries are great places to go to work. I do use ebooks. I do subscribe to movie services through libraries. I read magazines. And I think we need to cherish and support our libraries.
Yeah, Chris.
I have a friend who uses Libby a lot for downloading things. Another friend who, uses the library system, which is excellent here in Pima County for DVDs and movies and such. And the thing we often have meetings through my camera club at libraries. We've done the same thing with live meetings for the Tucson Mac user group, which Bob could talk about. And yeah, I think it's kind of regrettable. The thing that I think this really impacts is kids that don't have the resources at home that say I do to use audiobooks and podcasts and stuff like that. That they get a lot of that through the library, which is very popular here in Tucson after school. Um, what can I say? I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, the impacts I think are going to be felt more so in smaller rural library systems because there is a possibility that larger metropolitan systems can compensate for that lost in funding or aggregate the money in a way that they'll be able to survive some of this. But the small independent little libraries, independent small public libraries that are out in small towns and rural areas will be really challenged because they're not going to see the the support coming down from the state to mitigate the cost of these types of digital programs. Any other comments? Okay. Well, let's go to a second story, and I'm going to turn to Chris for this one.
Well, this was a fresh breaking story this afternoon. There's a new Sky AI app coming for Mac this summer. And I just put in the link and people could take a look at it. You can sign up for it. It, once again, like Perplexity, purports to be able to accomplish tasks which we would normally think that Iris or the S lady was taking care of. And so it's sort of interesting as a potential competitor. We don't have a lot to go on besides a video that they included. Just sort of, it appears to be a layer, as they describe it, above what's going on your computer, but it has awareness of what's on your screen. And so the user there is saying, hey, let's do dinner tonight. And, it's sort of a business thing. And, oh, let's stop at a bar first and do this and that. And it puts it on the calendar and it sends it text messages and does all of that sort of stuff. So we'll see what becomes of this, but there is an ability to, of course, go in and sign up now. We have no idea what the pricing will be. So as a contrast to this, I looked up last month's story on Perplexity that was also purporting to do similar tasks. And I have run one test so far, and it appeared to work. And as a sort of to wrap around this, I created a chat GPT prompt, which, as you can tell, is a little bit sloppy. I said, Perplexity is supposed to be able to perform Siri-like functions on Mac OS. How well does this work on iOS as well? And, I have an account now that I don't pay for on ChatGPT, so it knows who I am and I can, use partial sentences and stuff like that. So just to demonstrate that it doesn't have to be a picture perfect prompt. And then if you run that prompt, you will get the same information I did, but I didn't want to necessarily share that link in the show notes. People can do it themselves. But, to see how they compare and what this potentially may mean for Apple down the road, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah,
But I mean, some sort of layer, right, that would be accomplishing some of these tasks that the personalized S lady was supposed to be doing. And evidently they ran into some development problems and postponed a lot of it. But so we'll see.
yeah. I here's my concern about because what you demonstrated or what Sky demonstrates, we're going to have these links in the show notes so you can go and see the stories that we're talking about. But uh, one of the things that when you look at the demonstration of how Sky runs with it being able to read things off of your screen means you're giving it access to be able to do that and kind of make decisions. And so the big question is, who has the data then? Are you turning that data over to Skype? Same sort of issues with Perplexity in terms of where Apple Intelligence is. Apple Intelligence, we know what the system works for that. And then you look at other things like Gemini and other types of AIs, and it's pretty clear that the data is they're gathering data and they're either selling your data or using your data to sell ads. So I get cautious about screen readers that will do that. And there was a big, I think it was Microsoft recall, and it was this new addition to the Microsoft systems that and the operating system that they were touting. It's like, we're going to remember everything you do on your computer. It's going to record everything you do. Well, who has access to that data? How is that? There's just a lot of security questions, and Microsoft is not one known for such good protection of privacy. So Sky looks interesting. I want to spend some time with it and maybe sign up for it, but I'm also real curious about where the data goes,
Yeah.
because they're going to know I'm out on a date Saturday night now. Any other thoughts or comments?
Yeah, the privacy thing is really important. I switched away from Google to DuckDuckGo as a browser and a search engine. Now I just use it as a search engine. Several years ago, for some reason, I was doing research on dialysis for a friend of a friend. And 2 or 3 days later, my wife was getting Gmails about dialysis equipment. And we thought, now that is really weird.
Yeah, I spent some time this weekend in the Apple Store learning about Apple Intelligence, at least what the training group does in terms of how they train people on Apple Intelligence, and it was fascinating. But the big emphasis again was on what the system is like when you put queries in to ask Apple to do anything. And we have some stuff that's part of Apple Intelligence that gets into the show. As we get into the show, new features with Apple Intelligence that'll do some stuff with photography. So let's go ahead and start with the first question. I mentioned we're going to talk about how we use our cameras. I don't use my camera particularly. So I'm going to let you guys go at it because I know you're photographers and you're interested in that, and you make those kinds of, you have, the kind of use that is probably more typical of people who are iPhone owners in terms of shooting photography. So the first question is, what is the one task for which you use the camera the most?
Okay, since I'm a cell phone photographer, my answer would be photography. Um, I use my iPhone pretty much for most of my photography, except for wildlife, where I need telephoto. Um, I use 4 third-party apps, the Leica Lux app, which I highly recommend, but it's very expensive, the Halide app, the Varlens app, and Adobe Lightroom. And I got started with a third-party app called Camera Plus, and this was back in about 2014. It was actually a friend's wife. They were visiting us, and she said, "Oh, she found this other camera app called Camera Plus," and I started using that a lot. And this was with an iPhone 6S at the time, and I had about a 10-15 minute walk in from where the bus stopped every morning to my university position, and I was walking through a well-known and beautiful campus, and I often would get pictures. And so the camera in my pocket became the metaphor. And I can drill down a lot more as time permits.
Okay, Peter.
Yeah, I would have thought I would just say I'm a photographer like Chris, but I looked at my photos and I realized that I mainly use the camera as a crutch for my memory. I would call it a visual commonplace book. It's a personal repository for pieces of information that I encounter and I want to remember or revisit or investigate later. So it's different than the way some people might throw photos into a journal to focus on personal reflection or what happened each day. It's really to provoke insights and preserve inspirations. So, looking at the last day or so, I saw an unusual heron by the creek. I took a picture, found out later it's a green heron, not a blue, and it's not just color that makes the difference. There are quite a few differences. Where did I park my car when I was downtown at the big clinic parking lot this morning? You know, what level, what area of that level? Uh, I go to a lecture. I shoot all the slides in case the lecturer doesn't say, you know, share them with us at the end. I still have them. I see a nifty yard sign or a clever quotation in a store window. I take pictures of that. Uh, I saw an unusual camera and antenna attached to the traffic light nearest to my house. I'm going to go find out what that is. So those are the kinds of things I do.
Okay. Bob?
I like Peter's visual journaling comment, and I use that as well. Although I'm taking more photos with my phone, I still use it a lot for note taking. For example, we're having a problem with our pool's heater, and the display on the heater was throwing error codes and blinking lights and stuff like that. So I took a movie of it to show the repairman when he gets here, hopefully on Monday, and can take care of the issue. Also, things like Peter said, things that I need to remember, short term or longer term. I do that as well. Gary?
Uh, I I'm following Marty's new advice a little more rigidly about when I asked him about where his camera was because I was misplacing mine. So now my camera in almost all the time is either in my hands or in my pocket. And I too I now take pictures to share mostly by text messages, which was for Peter's visual journaling. And I think I use that. I also sometimes during podcast or something, I'll use my iPhone to take a picture of my 27-inch monitor so I have the details of what I want to remember. And I that's mostly how I use it. And it's the only camera that I use today, Marty.
Yeah, this was a hard question for me to answer because I don't use my camera a lot. And I kind of say as a joke, the thing that I remember using my camera for is every time I have an appointment at the doctor's, they do this pre screening questionnaire. And they always ask me to upload a picture of my driver's license and a picture of my insurance card. So most of the photographs that I take are on my iPhone to be able to upload that and share it every time I have to go to some medical appointment. Then there, and Peter kind of triggered this for me. There are memory details. Sometimes I need to remember something, and more often than not, it's serial numbers. So I use it because I have to have a home device that has a QR code on it or a serial number, and I have to put that serial number in, but I can't put it in when I have the device plugged into the wall. So how am I going to read the serial number on the back of it when it's plugged into the wall, thus blocking the serial number on the back of it? So take a picture, and I do this to kind of set up home protection and lighting systems, particularly when I'm traveling, so I can do that remotely. So take a picture, get the serial number, plug it in, start the Bluetooth running, and then setting it up on my phone using the serial number that I got from the picture that I took. So it's more those kind of temporary, immediate things that I have to remember. Now, with visual intelligence, at part of the iPhone, you can do some remarkable things by taking pictures of a poster of when something's going to occur, like there's a show or there's some community thing that's coming up. You take a picture of the poster, it will read all the details on it and put it into your calendar if you want it to put it into your calendar and set up reminders for it. So there's probably more memory like function in it that extends into other apps, particularly Apple apps now, that the phone can be useful for those kinds of things. So, question number 2: what is the one hope or dream for which you wish to use the camera? Chris.
Well, it looks like I'm starting again. I want to tag something on, though, that there's a podcaster who Bob and I both follow, Derek Story of The Digital Story. And one of his very early podcasts in the early 20 teens, he had this light bulb moment where he was doing just what you said, Marty. He was writing down a serial number, and he thought, wait, I've got a camera in my pocket. I could take a picture of that with my iPhone. And when I heard that, I thought, oh my God, what a great thing. And so I've been doing that ever since. So our question in terms of what we hope the camera would do, my answer today would be, we're pretty much at the limit of what these tiny sensors can do. I don't expect to get telephoto out of an iPhone. I'm really liking what it will do, especially what some of the third-party developers will do. Particularly, they read the SDK from page to page. And like a couple of years ago, the guy from Halide said all 192 pages, which is a lot, in terms of all the various capabilities. And they were the first to get instantaneous photos. And before that, there was a 0.24 second delay, which doesn't sound like much, but it is in reality. And so it's very interesting on that level. Well, having said all of that, right, today there's a rumor that Apple may be looking at 200 megapixel cameras, which is kind of an interesting trade-off because extra megapixels don't necessarily translate into better images. For instance, I'm not always using 48 megapixels. In fact, I rarely do on my iPhone 16. So, but we'll see what Apple comes up with. Yeah, I think. Oh, astrophotography is another area that, of course, people are still using big cameras for. And, they always will. I mean, the big cameras will continue to do better. I'm not suggesting they don't, and that people should stop using them. I have a lot of friends now, for instance, who are wildlife photographers who don't take short lenses anymore. They use their iPhone for all of the, documentary stuff they're doing and close-in photographs, and then they just leave the big honker lens on their camera and throw it over their shoulder. So. Okay, Peter.
Yeah, my hope and dream is probably one step removed from a camera, and it's a personal goal, and that is better photo management. I do a crummy job of that. And despite the fact that search has improved and I can do nice searches of my whole photo library, I want to have tags on things. So, for example, all screenshots will say screenshot. I didn't mention books before, but I probably have thousands of books that are things I might like to read, and I'd like to just push a button and see all of those. Quotes, nature, friends, family, names of events. I need to revive the discipline I had back when I used Aperture, where every time I pulled photos off a photo card, I went through and tagged them and graded them and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm going to make some kind of half New Year's resolution to every day say I'm going to tag today's photos plus 2 other days, and I'll bet before long I'll get things all tagged up.
Gary?
I like what Peter said about organizing. So that I'd like to learn. And then I mentioned to him, and it's in the show notes, that the, the ability to remove an object from a photograph that I took. Because normally I'm just pulling out the camera, not spending time, as Chris probably would, frame and look at what I take before I take the picture. So I find unwanted objects. I mentioned I have a shoe on a porch that I took a picture of my wife a number of years ago that is bothersome when I look at the picture. So there's the YouTube short in there that perhaps Peter put in the show notes. Show me how to do that, Marty.
Yeah, actually, I put that YouTube short in it because I mentioned earlier that I went and learned about Apple Intelligence and visual intelligence. And one of the things they showed us was how to remove objects from photos. And the short that we'll include as part of the show notes, you'll be able to look at it and figure it out pretty quickly. There's also a whole set of tips on your phone when it comes to Apple Intelligence. Not that we're talking about Apple Intelligence here, but there is a tips app that's on your phone from Apple, and one of the categories is visual intelligence or Apple Intelligence, and you could find their directions on how to remove objects. I always felt it would be a good kind of metaphysical question. If you remove an object from a photograph, does it disappear in real life? Um, and the issue of people spend all their time cleaning up photos and taking things out of it, but it's not a representation anymore of what is actually there. So that shoe on your doorstep, Gary, it was really there, even if you learn to take it out of the photo. I guess this is always been a problem for me. And what I wish or hope or dream that I would be able to do better with the camera, or the cameras would somehow be able to predict better for me, is the idea that I would have a quicker response to taking photos. It's like pulling it out. I forget to pull it out of my pocket. I'm experiencing it in the moment, and then it's done. And it's a missed opportunity to take pictures. I don't know how Apple can fix that. That's on me. But the idea that I need to be more cognizant of it, if I, but my fear is when I get so focused on my camera that I stop being part of the experience. I miss the experience because I'm looking at it through a camera. I'm not sitting with it and watching it. But my wish would be that there would be a quicker response on my part to taking photos. Third question: is there some lesser known feature on the camera that you think more people would enjoy knowing?
Well, Marty, you pointed out probably the one I should have noted first, which is the Apple Intelligence. And by the way, if you haven't tested that, it seems to be a lot based on location as to where someone is. Like, for instance, I did Apple Intelligence on a new Hawaiian barbecue building that had replaced a smash burger, and Apple Intelligence said, actually, it was a Chipotle, which apparently it was before it was a smash burger, which I found sort of interesting. But I think that the whole concept of this, which starts overlapping into Apple Glass and future products like that, there's a rich future there. What I was going to say for myself though is certainly I wish people would explore some of the more serious third-party photography apps, because there's some really good ones out there and that people spend a lot of time on. And for anybody who was a Leica shooter in their past and remembers that, the Leica app is just so much fun because it really simulates that look. So I guess that's all I'll say for now.
There's also an app I think that is very popular. I think it's called Halide.
Halide.
Halide, which is always seems to be a step ahead of where Apple is doing, what Apple is going to be doing with their camera. But that's and I purchase these things, and again, I'm not a photographer, but I play around with them, and Halide is a pretty good app too in terms of photographs. Peter.
Yeah, I think the thing I would share with people, and I think they would enjoy, is photo styles. Now, when you edit a photo, you can pick a style, uh, but I changed the default style to amber undertone -33, color 17, palette 100, which are some settings that you can do and set as the default. I think it gives you a realistic looking photo. I got these values by modifying one that I saw in some video, some YouTube from a guy named Tyler Stallman, a good photographer. But to me, it's almost like in the old days, I like to shoot if I was going to do something that was like a party, I liked shooting it on Kodachrome. It made the reds and yellows pop, and it made the thing seem very festive. If I was shooting nature, I wanted to shoot on Ektachrome slides. That made the greens and blues seem very lush. And I kind of think the iPhone by nature makes the greens a little too green, but with my adjustments, it just does everything into what I would consider neutral. If I want to then do something more dramatic, maybe I'd do a style, but for the most part, I like this standardization.
Bob?
Well, I was skipped in the last question. I'm really deeply hurt. Um, but I was reading the question differently than other people. I'm reading it as what I should have done but didn't. And the answer to that is I think it would be take more family photos. Family is so important. On to question 3. Things, the lesser known features of the camera. I think there's a few. One is panorama. I find myself almost never taking a panorama, and I think I should do more of that. And also scanning papers into the Notes app. You can scan, you can take a photograph of a piece of paper from within the Notes app, and it will automatically straighten the piece of paper, crop out the extraneous port, and turn it into a PDF with OCR. I think that that's magic. And then I agree with Chris with about third-party camera apps can give you more potential to your iPhone photography. Marty?
Yeah, I would think
I,
um, Gary. Yeah.
yeah, I put down that I didn't have an answer to this question, but what I really like, Marty, about putting this group together is that we're new enough to each other that we feed off and learn from each other. And if we assume that our audience is a lot like us, and therefore it's really all boats rising. And back to what Bob said, I'm going to check about taking family photos. I'm not sure when I got my iPhone, but the wonderful thing about having a phone with a camera is you can go back in history and find memories of pictures that you took. And as Bob says, taking pictures of the family bring back good memories as we as we age in our age season group. So that's my take, Marty.
Okay. One of the things that, thanks, Gary, for that. I took you seriously when you said you didn't have an answer for that, so I just jumped into
Yeah, I know that. I
me.
didn't, but then I got an answer from listening to Peter and
Yeah.
Bob.
Yeah, I think for me, on the 16 Pro Max, and I'm not sure what other, I guess the 16 Pro, they have that camera button on the side. And the camera button for me still is a bit janky in how it works. It is it haptic? Is it, levels of pressure that you put on it to open up all different kinds of opportunities for the phone to change your photo or to change the distance and the focus on your photo? It's really hard to kind of work through the logic of that. If you had a mind map, that might be helpful to say, okay, press once, you get this. Press a little bit harder, you get this. Press really hard, you get this. Press twice, then you get this. Press twice again, you get this. I mean, there's got to be some logical pathway. So my hope would be that would get better. I don't think it's been as successful as they anticipated it might be. I don't know. I don't get a read on it other than I don't know a lot of folks that are using it or using it to any extent. The thing that I like about it means if I remember that button's on the side, which is the biggest problem, is me remembering that still because it's kind of indented, it doesn't come out. If I remember that button's on the side, then I might be able to capture a real quick picture, which has been part of my problem. So, yeah, Chris.
There was actually I think, an update to the camera button back, maybe 6, 8 weeks ago now. And it did seem to get a little bit easier to use, but admittedly, it's kind of overburdened.
Yeah.
But there are times when it can be a terrific shutter button, particularly in video. And the few times I've used it with video, I found it quite handy. But yes, there are plenty of times where I'll use the on-screen shutter button instead.
Yeah.
But I wanted to mention too that going back to what Peter said, the AI tasks that Peter mentioned are very high on the list. That there are a lot of people with Adobe and Apple who are looking to do that, have AI organize your photos for you. And the searching capability is really getting better. There's some third-party AI cataloging and searching apps from a company called Cyme, CYME, in Paris or outside of Paris. And they make a product called Peak 2, and they make a couple of searching things, which can be sort of a super cataloger. It does require a lot of memory, but their AI is really spectacular. You could get a sunset with red tones or orange tones or blue tones or something like that. The other thing Peter said is in terms of like Kodachrome, it's very much been a goal of several of the manufacturers, probably starting with Fujifilm, but Nikon and others have picked this up too, where there are apps. My Varlens app, for instance, has a Kodachrome thing that replicates Steve McCurry's work. And, there is also I have to talk a little bit about movies here because there's a thing in movies called color grading, which I think the big thing was in Terminator that everybody saw that after the end of the world, all the colors in the world turned to blue instead of what they were before, that kind of thing. But more recently, the Oppenheimer movie used a special kind of color grading. And there are people that actually do this for a living. My friend Bob Reese in British Columbia, his son Greg, actually is a color grader in Hollywood. That's what his job, what he does. But at any rate, the Oppenheimer filter, which worked for Los Alamos in New Mexico, works terrifically well here in Tucson. Plus another one in Camera Plus, which is called Desert Vibe, which also renders the light very, very well. There's also one for Dune. So now, having said all of this, Marty mentioned halide, and the chief developer, Sebastian DeWitt, I would say is probably acknowledged as the leading third-party camera developer on the planet. I mean, he has done stuff and really pioneered a lot of stuff in halide. And so if you're looking to start with a reasonably priced third-party camera app, I would hands down recommend halide.
Well, Chris, it goes back to you actually, because you're the first one with tips.
Okay, so
Because we're going to
continuing
each give
on
a
with the
tip if we have them.
photography, I discovered a really weird thing, and a screenshot might be more explanatory. But a friend sent me a photo, and I saved it off to the Finder so I could take a look at it later. And when I went in there in the Finder, I saw a little button that said, "From Willis." And I clicked the button, and it went right back to the email. Now, this may sound kind of trivial, but imagine it's 10 years ago, or I find an image from 10 years ago, as I could easily do, and I say, wow, what email was that? And there's a button right there, and I can click it, and it goes back to the original email. And I tested it. It works for Macs, it works from PCs. Uh, I didn't test it on iOS, but I'm sure it works there. And this is potentially a really big deal to be able to link stuff back and forth and get photos. I mean, I don't often get images from somebody else, but when I do, going back and getting perhaps an original, let's say I worked on a photo and I changed it, I didn't save it as a new image. I want to go back to the original, it was in the email. We can do stuff like that now. So it's sort of an example of the little subtleties that Apple is slipping in to the OSs with these incremental updates, and we find them and they're just total gems. So that would be my tip for today.
Yeah, Chris, that's a great tip. I'm going to interrupt the flow a little bit because I noticed Bob has been in the chat room with John Johnson. And his comment was, when I use the touch screen shutter while not in live photo, I get a burst shots when I intended just a single shot. And Bob, you commented on that?
Well, well, I thank John for reminding me about burst mode.
Yeah.
I can't advise John as to what he's doing or what he could do differently to prevent that. But burst mode is um, an interesting thing where if it is a little kid playing with a balloon, something like that, if you take a whole bunch of those pictures in burst mode, you're likely to find one that is the right one, and you can throw
Yeah.
away the other 99 of them.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right answer or not, but I suspect if you touch the button, you get a shot. If you touch and hold the button, you go into burst mode. Would be my guess that's what's going on. Chris?
You could configure it that way. There's also a facility, I think, in the Apple Camera app to touch and drag to the right, and there's a little blue dot over there or something. And when you do that, you'll go into burst mode. Um,
Hmm.
I think burst mode is great, like Bob says, when you're intentionally wanting to use it. When you don't want to use it, you can just get a whole ton of images. But Apple, again, has anticipated this, and so you can pick the one you want to save and delete the rest. But it's still, to have it go into burst mode unnecessarily. Traditionally, the big thing has been the volume up button that was used for burst mode, and the regular volume down button can be used as a shutter as well. So something else to
Well,
play with.
let's go on to Peter, who wants us to spend money. Peter?
Of, c- of course. Well, my tip is a camera accessory combo. Uh, I find holding the phone awkward in taking pictures a lot of times. So what I've been using for many years now is a Moment Magsafe tripod mount. I just set my camera on it. It's instantly attached, and I attach that to a what was called a Litra. I think the manufacturer's names change over time. I put a link to a current one in the show notes, extendable tripod handle, and then I can it's almost like a gimbal holder, but without the gimbal. And I think that would be great. You can, I'll just comment on what other people have said. You can lock down the camera control button so it does less things, and I have done that, which makes it more useful. But I noticed when I was looking up my links for the show notes, uh, shooting handles almost that give you a big grip on the side of the camera and put your finger in just the right spot to touch that camera control. And so I'm going to probably go spend some money, and then I can report back on how that all works out.
Okay. You know, Bluetooth shooting. Oh, that's showing the Ulanzi is what you call it,
Yes,
which looks like a
that's a case. It
interesting.
goes together with a case that fits around your iPhone, and then that clicks into the case when you want to shoot.
Ah,
And then you have a big chunk to hold on to. And it's got its own button there, but I can imagine using a different one there. I mean, there are varieties of these where you could use the camera control button to do some of the stuff it does. And I did see the Leica one, Chris, which is like $350, but I'm not recommending that today.
you know,
Yeah,
there
I've yet to
is.
talk to anybody that has that, but I'm very curious if anybody likes it. The price is just unbelievable. And
Yeah,
there's a
there
$60 case to put it on your belt.
Right.
A nice leather case for $60 on your belt.
there is a device that I know Chuck Joyner showed. Uh, maybe it was in I think it might have been in the Mac show on the British Tech Network, and it is like a two-handle device that you mount your phone in the middle of it, and it almost I think acts as kind of a gimbal too in terms of reducing motion in it. But you can also add other things onto it like lights and such. It's pretty impressive, but I remember it as being kind of expensive, and I thought I don't need that to take pictures of my insurance card. But it is pretty cool, the idea of having two hands to hold it up.
Marty, it's a big deal for video. And they
Yeah,
call it a cage. They call it a
yeah.
cage that sort of wraps around it. And you can put a microphone on the top. You can put a cold shoe for something else on the bottom. Um, and it's incredibly handy because it's set at about shoulder width
Hmm.
to hold the camera, and you can do some pretty effective stuff combined with the what we would call IBIS, the in-body image stabilization that comes with iPhones that makes video so stable that I would never go to a big camera anymore. Well, of course, also my video is pretty, consumerish stuff, but I've had a lot of fun with a couple of videos that worked out really well. I did one at Bosque del Apache of the blast off and got a lot of likes on it on Flickr. But you can do stuff like that because the video capability of these iPhones is just amazing. Not that you're going to go out and shoot something like the Halloween keynote that Apple did a couple of years ago. I don't know if you guys remember seeing that.
Yeah.
And it was all done on iPhone. And somebody came on and said, yes, but Apple used about $1 million of accessories to do that. So
All right. Another tip. We go to Bob.
I think that you need to protect your phone. Uh, get a waterproof case for your phone, preferably one that like hangs around your neck. That way, if you're anywhere near water, you can keep the phone safe from splashes and maybe even a short dunk. I also recommend getting a good case for drop protection, and a screen protector for drop protection. Remember, your iPhone is your external brain. Protect your phone as your life is in there. Gary?
Well,
I'm Gary's passing on this one.
Gary's passing on this one, so I'll jump to mine. And this might be low hanging fruit, but I thought it was worth mentioning. I had the experience, as I mentioned, going into the Apple store to learn about Apple Intelligence and visual intelligence this week. And while the instructor was trying to show me to go to something, I had my 16E in and I didn't have my action button set to jump to visual intelligence. But you can set your action button on the 16 phones to a variety of choices, one of them being to jump right into visual intelligence. I had mine set as, as I've always had that when it used to be a little switch on the side to silence, basically. And so I'd push it to silence, push it to remove silence. But you can use the action button for a lot of different things and different ways to customize it. And I've included, again, all of these links will be in the show notes, but this will tell you how to actually change the action button. You can turn it into a camera button if you want. And it gives you different icons that represent different things that it can do. Tremendous amount of things that the action button can do. Even going to shortcuts. So if you're going to do something as sophisticated as creating a shortcut, you can tag your action button to run that shortcut for you instead of having to open the phone and open the shortcut. So that's my tip for this show. Kind of camera related, kind of not. But I have set it up now for visual intelligence, and we use other ways to shut down or silence my phone. Any final comments, folks? Hearing none, I will want to talk a little bit about Macstock. It's coming up, and it is July 11th, 12th, and 13th. And it is in Northern Illinois, in Crystal Lake, close to Woodstock, hence the name Macstock. It's Macstock 9. There's just a variety of wonderful presentations. I would encourage you to go to Macstock Conference and Expo. That's all one word. Macstock Conference and Expo.com and take a look at what's going on. You'll see a list of the presenters, and you'll get some great presenters going to be there. Kelly Guimont, David Ginsburg, Jeff Gamet, Allison Sheridan, Mike Schmitz, and Doc Rock of Ecamm will be there to present and have some workshops on Ecamm. Just some wonderful things coming up with that, and all sorts of enjoyable community and conversation with folks. Take a look at the website, macstockconferenceandexpo.com. Bob, you've been there. Anything else you want to say about that?
If you can attend, attend. If you can't, get the digital pass and watch it later.
Yeah. Digital passes come out about 30 days. I think Mike shoots to get them done 30 days after the actual conference, and he tries to roll out all the digital stuff. Gary's coming this year. Gary and I are going to have a long road trip to Macstock, and we'll either survive the trip or, one of us will be standing at the side of the road
Oh, come
between
on, Marty.
Ohio.
Long road trip? It's about 8 hours. You can do that
Yeah,
with two
I
pee
know.
breaks.
Yeah, I know, Bob. You drive all the way up from Tucson, so I get it. Yeah, yeah. But do you switch off drivers with Roger?
Yeah, Roger rides with me eastbound, and we stop overnight twice. But then he goes home via air, and I go on to visit friends and relatives in Wisconsin, and therefore
Yeah,
I drive home by myself.
yeah. Gary and I are going to wind up in Chicago a little bit longer than what we anticipated because we're picking up my son at O'Hara, and if we get there early enough, which I hope we will, by leaving early, we'll have a little time to hang out in Chicago, and who knows, we might drive past Wrigley Field just to see Wrigley. But we'll pick up Will sometime around 4 or 5, and then head out to Macstock. Gary, yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. But Marty, I thought there's Chuck Joyner's doing interviews. Maybe briefly, you might mention that of people who will be speaking at Macstock. And that
Yeah.
will allow people to take that out and then sign up. Maybe you put a link for the conference in the show notes also.
Yeah, there's always a link. Thanks, Gary. There's always a link in the show notes for the conference, Macstock Conference and Expo.com. And I'll see if I can find a link to that pulls people directly to Road to Macstock. That's Chuck Joyner's work on macvoices.com. And you can see some of the videos of the people who are presenting. Bob tells me mine just got posted yesterday. And so my video interview with Chuck about AI, because I'll be talking about AI coming up. And then Chuck and I and Will are trying to schedule a time for our interview, but it's complicated by the fact that Will's 3 hours, well, he's around Bob's time, and Chris's time. He's in Vegas and working in Vegas, and working late, and so it's kind of hard to find a time. We're trying to work it out. I'm sure we will, but we'll get a Road to Macstock with father and son and Chuck Joyner. But take a look at Macstock Conference and Expo.com. We have an exclusive coupon. The code you can use is PodTalk50. You save $50 if you're going to join us live at Macstock, the Macstock Conference. So let's wrap up this episode. Our next live episode will be we'll be in June by then. What, June 3rd? June 4th. We'll be back at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. You can watch the live stream at youtube.com/@oldmacgang, or pick us up later on your podcast service, or also through YouTube. You can catch it at youtube.com/@oldmacgang. It's great to be doing this show with folks, and it every week is kind of a joy to do it. So I'm grateful for everybody being here and contributing as they do. Our music bed is by Philip Gross, Marrakesh, courtesy of the Free Music Archive. More information about the podcast and others can be found at thepodtalk.net. Thanks to the group, Gary, Chris, Peter, and Bob. And thank you for being part of the Old Mac Gang. See you next time.